The more you gave, the less he valued you, not because you weren't enough, but because his ego was overdosed. You loved him with your whole heart, open hands, soft eyes, patience that bent until it cracked. You held him through silence. You stayed when he pulled away, and still he drifted, as if your devotion was air, not fire, as if your presence was owed, not chosen. You gave him everything, your words, your softness, your second chances. And what did he do? He turned cold. He pulled back. He left you wondering what more you could give. But here's the truth that no one ever told you. He didn't reject you. He got drunk on the feeling of being needed. And when the high wore off, he needed another fix. Not of love, but of control. This isn't a story about seduction. It's not about making a man fall in love with you. It's about understanding why he obsesses over the one who never begged, never explained, never chased. Because obsession doesn't begin with admiration. It begins with disruption. You weren't forgotten. You were unresolved. And that's what lingers in the deepest corners of a man's ego. So if you've ever whispered, "Why wasn't I enough?" I want you to listen closely. Because the answer was never about your worth. It was about his wound. And the moment you stop feeding it is the moment he starts craving you like a ghost that won't let him sleep. Let's start with this. A man's ego isn't his strength. It's his armor, polished on the outside but brittle underneath. And the moment you stop polishing it for him, the cracks begin to show. You see, most men walk through the world with an ego constructed like a house of mirrors. It reflects what they want to believe about themselves, powerful, desired, in control. But that reflection doesn't come from within. It comes from you. When a woman admires him, praises him, centers her world around him, his ego swells. Not his heart, not his love, his ego. That's the trap, because what he's really addicted to isn't you, it's the image of himself you gave him. Carl Jung called this projection. The idea that we fall in love not with others, but with the pieces of ourselves we see in them. When a man sees admiration in your eyes, he sees himself magnified, elevated, crowned. But the moment you stop handing him that mirror, he feels empty. Not because you changed, but because the illusion cracked. He wasn't in love with your love. He was in love with the way your love made him feel about himself. And here's where the deeper psychology begins. Jung taught that within every man lives an unconscious feminine energy. He called it the anima. It's the part of him that longs to connect, to feel, to merge. But it also terrifies him, because real connection requires vulnerability. And vulnerability? That threatens the very ego he spent a lifetime protecting. So what does he do when a woman touches that place in him? He runs. He pulls away. Not because you did something wrong, but because he felt something real. And that realness, that emotional mirror you held up, showed him not just his desire, but his shadow. The shadow is everything he represses, his fear of being inadequate, his buried grief, his hunger to be loved without conditions he's never had to meet. So when you gave him unconditional presence, he didn't feel safe. He felt exposed. Understand this. He didn't fall for the woman who praised him. He became obsessed with the one who disrupted the performance. The one who left him questioning who he was, not the one who kept reminding him. Obsession begins in absence, not abundance. When you disappeared without explanation, when you withheld the reflection his ego had come to depend on, he didn't just lose a woman. He lost the story of himself. That's the heartbreak he can't admit. That's the wound that reopens every time your name crosses his mind. Because his ego doesn't crave connection, it craves certainty. And when you were no longer predictable, when you didn't beg or explain or chase, you became the one thing his ego can't stand, unfinished. That's the moment obsession begins. Not in pleasure, but in disruption. Not in intimacy, but in mystery. The male ego is terrified of ambiguity, because ambiguity means he's not in control. He doesn't know where he stands. And if he doesn't know where he stands, he starts to spiral. He replays every word you said. He rewatches every memory, not because he misses you, but because he's trying to locate himself in your absence. Was I still enough? Did she stop needing me? Has she replaced me? It's not love he's chasing. It's power he lost. Control he can't get back. So he obsesses, because he's not sure anymore if he ever really had you. And that doubt, that ache of uncertainty, it worms its way into his mind like a splinter he can't pull out. He won't tell his friends. He won't write about it. But at 2 a.m., when the world goes quiet, he feels it. That hollow space you left behind. That mirror you shattered when you walked away. You see, most men aren't afraid of losing you. They're afraid of losing their hold on you. There's a difference. And when you understand that, you stop trying to prove your worth and you start protecting your power. You realize that your silence speaks louder than your explanations, that your withdrawal echoes longer than your presence ever could, that your restraint creates more gravity than your affection ever did. Because obsession isn't a byproduct of your effort, it's the result of your disruption. You didn't give him a comfortable ending, you gave him a psychological riddle. And that's what keeps you living rent-free in his mind. So the next time you find yourself asking, why did he pull away when I gave him everything? Remember this, you were never meant to be his reward, you were his reflection. And when you withdrew that reflection, he was left with nothing but himself. And for a man who lives through his ego, that is the most terrifying mirror of all. Now that you understand the mechanism, that what he's missing isn't you, but his reflection in you, we shift from understanding to embodiment, from analysis to action. But this isn't performance. You're not playing hard to get, you're being hard to forget. And that difference, it lives in the depth of your silence. Let's begin with the most powerful force in the emotional universe, selective silence. When he pulls away, he's not always punishing you. He's testing gravity. He wants to know if your world still spins without him. So when you respond with pleading paragraphs and emotional confessions, you confirm his center of gravity. But when you go silent, calm, present, unfazed, you disrupt the laws of his emotional physics. You show him your world was never orbiting his. And that silence? It doesn't echo like absence, it echoes like power. He won't admit it, but it shakes him. Because a man expects your need, he's prepared for it. He can manage it. What he cannot manage is your indifference. Selective silence isn't ghosting, it's sacred. It's the quiet you create when your energy is no longer available on demand. And in that quiet, his ego starts to panic. He rereads your last message, searches for signs, calculates what went wrong. Not because he loves you yet, but because you became unpredictable. Obsession begins where predictability dies. The next tool is emotional scarcity. Listen carefully. This isn't about being cold. It's about being costly. A man will never value what he can access for free, on demand, without effort. Not because he's cruel, but because his subconscious is wired for challenge. Jungian instinct. The chase awakens the archetype of the hero, the pursuer, the protector. When you constantly affirm him, explain yourself, check in, remind him of your worth, you rob him of the tension that makes you valuable. But when your energy becomes a rarity, when your attention must be earned and not assumed, you become unforgettable. He stops wondering if you want him. He starts wondering why you don't need him. And that question? That's the hook that never loosens. When he texts you a vague message, a breadcrumb, don't rush to decode it. Don't reply instantly. Let your response come from presence, not fear. A brief, neutral reply, or none at all. Not to punish, but to reflect who you are without him. He must learn that your world continues, beautifully, regardless of his signal. Strategic withdrawal is the third blade in your emotional arsenal. This is the most difficult and the most devastating. It means you leave when things feel good. You pull away when he expects closeness. You end the call at the emotional high point. You vanish not in anger, but in elegance. Why? Because the ending writes the memory. He doesn't remember the hours you spent on the phone. He remembers that you ended the call with warmth and mystery before he was ready. He doesn't obsess over the affection you gave. He obsesses over the moment you stopped. This is the paradox of desire. He chases not what feels familiar, but what feels unfinished. You became the mirror he couldn't look away from, the question he couldn't answer, the story without a final scene. And that story, the one where he didn't get closure, that's the one his ego plays on repeat. Because men are taught to conquer, to win, to dominate the dynamic. But you changed the rules without telling him. You stopped trying to win him, and he realized he'd never won you. That reversal fractures his identity. And in that fracture, obsession is born. Now let's be clear, this isn't about manipulation. It's about symbolic influence. It's about reclaiming your place as the emotional center of gravity in your own life. You are no longer the reflection, you are the source. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole unto yourself. And when a woman reaches this state, she becomes more than a partner. She becomes a symbol. She's no longer that woman I dated. She becomes the one who got away. The one who didn't flinch. The one who walked through his silence like a cathedral, carrying her own echo. Because here's the ultimate truth. When you stopped performing for him, he started performing for your memory. When you stopped chasing, he started chasing clarity. Not just about you, but about himself. And that's where obsession turns inward. He starts asking, why did she pull back? Did I do something wrong? What did she see in me? And when did she stop seeing it? His mind isn't trying to understand you. It's trying to repair his identity. Because you were the mirror, and then you weren't. You were the echo, and then came the silence. And in that silence, he's not haunted by the words you said, he's haunted by the words you never did. What did that awaken in you? Have you ever been that mirror for someone? What part of you stayed silent when you wanted to speak? If any part of this has made you feel seen, or if a name came to mind while you were listening, pause right now and type it in the comments. Let your reflection become someone else's revelation. And if this speaks to something you've always felt but never heard aloud, tap the like button and subscribe. This channel is where your inner knowing finally finds language. Now remember, obsession isn't fed by proximity. It's forged in the heat of emotional tension, not just in what you give, but in what you withhold. You're not trying to be less loving. You're learning to be more sovereign. Because when you master emotional restraint, when your presence is no longer automatic, but sacred, you stop being the chapter he reads at night. You become the book he can't put down. Let's talk about the traps, the places where you, in all your tenderness, give your power away without even realizing it. Because this isn't about blaming you. This is about waking you up. Waking you up from the trance of performance, from the addiction to proving your worth to someone whose desire was never about you, but about how you made him feel about himself. And the first pitfall? Over-explaining. The need to be understood, to clarify your intentions, to soften your silence so it won't be mistaken for anger. To write long messages when he goes quiet, thinking maybe, just maybe, this time he'll hear you. But he's not listening for your words. He's listening for need. And every time you explain, justify, plead, he hears one thing. I still want you more than I want my dignity. And that confirms his position, not as a lover, but as a center, the axis around which your emotions spin. So stop explaining. Let your actions speak. Let your absence speak louder than your paragraphs ever could. The second pitfall? Chasing. You think it's about effort, that if you just show him how good you are, how loyal, how deep, how willing to grow, he'll finally recognize your value. But let me tell you something most men won't. The more he felt in control, the less he needed you. Your devotion didn't win him over. It fed his ego until it was too full to feel anything but his own importance. And then he left. Not because you were wrong, but because he had nothing left to conquer. Because when a man knows he has you, unconditionally, without challenge, without the risk of losing you, his primitive mind turns away. Not out of cruelty, out of wiring. The masculine chase dies in certainty. So when you made yourself obvious, available, accessible at every hour, you gave him emotional closure before the story even began. And he walked away. Not from your value, but from the absence of tension. Now, here's the most dangerous pitfall of all. Mistaking emotional control for emotional connection. You confuse his calm for depth, his silence for mystery, his aloofness for strength. But often what you're seeing isn't strength, it's avoidance. It's a man who has never faced his own shadow, a man who runs from intimacy disguised as control. You offer warmth thinking it'll melt his resistance. But he's not cold because you're not enough. He's cold because he's terrified to feel. And the more you try to unlock him, the more locked out you become. Because real connection only happens when both people bring their vulnerability to the table. And if you're the only one bringing it, you're not in a relationship, you're in an emotional performance. So here's the turning point. The moment you reclaim the feminine, not the submissive feminine, not the seductive feminine, the sovereign feminine, the one who stops performing, the one who sits inside herself like a throne, no longer desperate for clarity, but curious. no longer afraid of his silence, but anchored in hers. Because here's the truth most women never get told. You don't need to be louder to be heard. You need to be more still. Still like an ocean at midnight. Still like the moment before thunder breaks. Still like a woman who knows her worth doesn't hinge on someone else's recognition. From that stillness comes dignity. Not the performance of being unbothered, but the genuine knowing that you have nothing to prove. Not to him, not to anyone. You want to reclaim your power? Stop narrating your pain to the person who caused it. Start transforming it in your own hands. Because here's the most sacred truth I can offer you. The more he felt in control, the less he needed you. But the moment he felt powerless, he couldn't forget you. Let that sink in. When he held the reins, he rode casually through your heart, never looking back. But the second you stopped being predictable, when your tone changed, your presence withdrew, when you no longer filled the silence with softness, he began to ache. Not for you, but for who he was in your presence. That ache? That's the seed of obsession. But here's the key. You must let him sit in it. Don't run back when he spirals. Don't soothe the wound his ego is finally beginning to feel. Don't mistake his panic for genuine change. Growth is slow, transformation is silent, and your role is not to mother it, but to witness it from afar. Because now, your attention is currency, and your presence is sacred ground. The woman who chases is forgotten, but the woman who walks away with grace, she becomes myth. He may never say it, but he will feel it. When he hears your name, something will tighten in his chest. When he sees your photo, a question will rise in his throat that he can't quite swallow. Not because you were perfect, but because you left before he could define you. And that, my dear, that's the power of feminine reclamation. So now I ask you, where have you over-explained your value? What version of you still waits for a man to validate her existence? And more importantly, what would it feel like to never wait again? Because the moment you answer that, you begin the most sacred return. Back to yourself, back to your body, back to the quiet strength that doesn't scream to be seen but cannot be ignored. You were never just a woman to him. You were a mirror. And the day you stopped reflecting what he wanted to see, he couldn't look away. He'll remember the way you held back when every other woman leaned in, the way your silence made his confidence tremble, the way your absence spoke a language his ego couldn't decode. He won't say your name aloud, but he'll whisper it in memory. He'll feel it in the pause between texts, in the quiet between lovers, in the ache that returns at midnight when everything else is still. You didn't hurt him with anger. You pierced him with indifference. You shattered the illusion, and in doing so became unforgettable. Not because you played a game, but because you ended one. So let this be your truth now. You are not here to be understood by men who only listen to their own reflection. You are not here to beg for love from egos that only feed on certainty. You are here to become whole. To become your own source. To become the kind of myth that lingers long after the man forgets why he first looked your way. Let your absence be the spell. Let your dignity be the myth he never forgets. Before you go, do one last thing for your future self. Subscribe, like, and share this with the version of you who needed it most. Not because I asked you to, but because your story isn't over. And this channel, it's here to help you write the next chapter, with truth, with power, and without apology.